is a historic reform that will touch the lives of 140 crore Indians, not just for today, but for centuries to come. And while doing so, we are ridding ourselves of a 162-year-old colonial baggage and are moving towards a Swadeshi Vyavastha at the time when Bharat is entering the Amrit Kal of its glorious period of history. I want to thank and congratulate Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji and a very visionary Home Minister Amit Shah ji for piloting this historic reform of India's criminal justice law. Adhyakji, if you will spend a minute to understand the context in which our criminal justice system came to be introduced by the British, it comes to light that all the three criminal justice legislations, the IPC, the CRPC, as well as the Evidence Act, were enacted right after the 1857 First War of India uprising, First War of India's independence uprising. The objective of the then British government, while introducing these three legislations, was to subject the natives, subject the Indians to such a criminal justice system that will obliterate, annihilate all kinds of possibilities of rebellion. So all the three laws, the Indian Penal Code, the CRPC and the Evidence Act, were all enacted with this intention of subjecting the native population to humiliation and making sure that their self-confidence was always subjected to insults. The British understood that there are two important aspects of a society that need to be controlled to completely colonize and destabilize a native population. One was education, and the other was the criminal justice system. And Lord Macaulay, in his prophetic Education Minute, exhaustively mentions how the British tried to colonize, British tried their very best to remove from the memory, the civilizational memory of this country, our educational as well as criminal justice system that had been in practice for so long in the country. I must say today that when the country is the threshold of Amrit Kal, under the leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, we have enacted the National Education Policy 2020, and today we are enacting these three Sanhitas, which is going to replace the colonial code, and in the true sense, we are moving away from colonization of education and colonization of our criminal jurisprudence. Today marks an important day also, Speaker Sir, because for about 160 long years and almost 7 decades after independence, the country's criminal justice system followed legislations which were made by the British, made for the welfare of the British, and made in Britain. Today, in those places, we are enacting a law that is made by Bharat, made in Bharat, and made by Bharatiyas for the welfare of Bharatiyas. This marks a very important step in our decolonization journey. While we are here, I would want to draw the attention of this House, Speaker Sir, to another important aspect of the British criminal jurisprudence, of how vicious the intent of the British was while bringing and enacting these legislations. One of the biggest examples of this intent of the British is in the example of the Criminal Tribes Act of 1871. Speaker, sir, in 1871, the British Raj enacted a legislation called the Criminal Tribes Act, under which large communities, large tribes were declared as criminals by birth, and they were subjected to multiple humiliations and restrictions. There were police manuals that were drafted enumerating long lists of how these criminal tribes must be dealt with, how they must be punished, how they must be abused. And for a long time, even after independence, Speaker, sir, many of our jail manuals contained these very provisions, and many tribes which were enumerated in these Criminal Tribes Act faced severe humiliations both legally and socially. Many of the major castes of Hindu society, Ahirs, Gujars, Lodhi, Chamars, Pasi, like this, this was the word that was used by the British. Yes, it is unparliamentary. This was the words that were used by the British. Many of these communities, more than 130, 140 of them, they were declared as criminals by birth. And by 1947, at the time of our independence, more than 2 crore people existed in this country who were criminals by definition as criminals by birth. This was the intent behind the criminal justice system of the British. This is just to show, this is just to explain the monumental difference that we are today making by moving out of the dark shadow of the British's criminal justice system and moving towards a completely Indian and Swadeshi justice system.
I would suggest the names that have uttered should be removed. Only the numericals,
Adhyakji,
that is to be.
with respect to the changes that have been made in these 3 legislations, I want to take a few minutes to highlight some very important changes. Under the BNS, importance has now been given, precedence has now been given to crimes against women and children. And some of the most important changes that have been made keeping in mind the protection, empowerment, and justice delivery for our sisters in the country. Not only the precedence in numbering reflects this intent of the government, but also providing for death penalty for gang rape of a minor girl is introduced for the first time. Most importantly, we are witnessing over the last few years a concerted attempt by a certain vested interest groups of suppressing their identity and luring young women under the false pretext of marriage. Even this has been declared an offense, and stringent provisions have been made to punish such attempts. We also keep observing, Speaker, sir, that there are multiple instances of hit and run cases, what we refer in a colloquial term. In most of these hit and run cases, it is always the rich who hit and run, and who are the poor, who do not have access to justice, who do not have access to power, who are left fighting for justice without any support. For a long time, this offense of hit and run was not codified, was not declared an offense. That has now been brought in. As also, offenses like chain snatching and mobile snatching, which is, if you go to any police station today, there is a board always in the police stations. If you will see, most of the cases that are reported in urban areas, at least in the country, are these chain snatching and mobile snatching cases. But unfortunately, we did not have a penal provision to deal with this. This has been added. We have also seen that whenever there are protests, in the name of displaying outrage, certain anti-social elements use that opportunity to damage public property. And public property amounting to crores get damaged. For the first time, under mischief, by expanding the provision, damage to public property has also been made an offense. And hereafter, any anti-social elements who will indulge in any such activity